Ed of Soltar Solutions, and I am here today with a phenomenal show on podcasting. Everyone knows that this is my new love, and I am so excited to introduce this guest. Just to let you know, when I contacted him for the pre-interview, which normally takes about 20 minutes, maybe a half hour, we were 3.5 hours on the phone. So this guy is a wealth of knowledge. It is amazing. And not only that, throughout my interviews, I heard his name come up several times. So you might want to really listen in, grab a pen and paper, and take notes on this, because this guy has it. He really knows. Paul, I am so happy to have you on the show today.
Lori, it's great to talk to you again. Oh, let me adjust my camera here. All right. Good to see you.
Thank you. So tell us about podcasting.
Podcasting is basically what radio was, or still is. Podcasting is basically online radio. If you've ever listened to the radio, I don't know, in the car or whatever, you can take the content from that radio, put it online as a file, and download it and listen to it anytime you want. So it's kind of like DVR for your TV. You can record your show anytime you want and then listen and watch it anytime you want. With podcasting, it's not only is it just like an online radio show, but it's basically any topic in the world that you can think of. Anything from interview shows where they interview entrepreneurs, to a show like mine, which is a personal growth show where you learn how to improve yourself. And it's just like anything you could possibly think of is in a podcast. And there's probably about 250,000 podcasts, no, probably 300,000 by now, because podcasting has just exploded this year. And so having the option to play it anytime you want and having an option to put it in your ears instead of having to watch it on a screen gives you mobility, gives you portability, allows you to do whatever you want while you're listening to it. So it's very similar to radio, and it's what's called time-shifted recording, meaning it gets recorded and then you can play it anytime you want. Hope that breaks it down.
Well, yes, absolutely. That's fabulous. So how did you get bitten by the bug? Tell me about it.
Well, it's funny because last year I was working at a full-time job in IT. I was putting computers in a hospital, and I got promise after promise that I was going to be hired on full-time. I was a project guy. And eventually I just cornered someone and said, hey, am I really going to get hired on full-time at the end of this project? And they just said, well, just pay attention to the job boards. We can't promise anything. So I was kind of led on, with that dangling golden carrot. And I wanted to do something with my life. I was thinking, I don't want people to control my life anymore. I want to control my life. So I started looking online for entrepreneurial stuff, and I got upon a podcast on one of these websites, and I started listening to it and go, wow, this is pretty interesting. And I found one that actually interviewed entrepreneurs, and they were podcasting. And as I looked more and more into it, I found out that people who are online, who have businesses online or even offline, were starting podcasts. So I was like, what is this podcasting? And I kind of always had a secret desire to do radio broadcasting. So there's a little secret desire in there that kind of pushed me along too. But once I found out what a podcast was, I was hooked. I started listening to them more, and I realized that people are putting themselves out there on the air, or at least on the internet, and getting themselves known. And whatever they're doing in business, they're also putting out there on the air. So it's almost like, hey, I'm gonna put myself out into the world, and it'll be available to everyone, like the entire world. It's like a real draw. Once you start listening to podcasts, you start going, what can I talk about? And that's what happened to me.
Well, I can totally understand that. I was up until the day that I talked to you, I was up until 3:30 in the morning listening to podcasts. Next morning I woke up, I right away run to the podcast. I'm like, whoa, I got to get something done, some real work. So I can't really be listening to all these podcasts. But yesterday I was listening to a podcast. What is the name of the network? Let me just think for a second. GFN. Yes. GFQ, guys from Queens, okay? Now, they're talking about technology, and they're talking about Microsoft, and they're talking about HP, and I'm really not that interested in this stuff. And I'm like this.
You're
Finally, I'm
engaged.
like, what am I doing? My hands are poised, on top of the keyboard. I'm supposed to be writing an article to go out to be distributed in Australia, and I'm like this.
It's fantastic.
So,
That's what it does. It's very mesmerizing. It's like you keep listening. You want to hear more, and especially when it's an engaging host. If there's an engaging host that no matter what they're talking about, you're suddenly involved because they're passionate about what they're talking about, and you go, "Wow, I don't care about flipping houses, but I want to hear more."
exactly. I felt, you know what I felt like? I felt like I was being hypnotized. Like I was there, I was just being hypnotized by this. And it was actually two hosts and they were kind of going back and forth. But I couldn't get anything done. Finally, the phone rang, which brought me out of my hypnotic state. And I turned that off. I said, no more of that right now. And I was able to get back. But this is the thing. It's like when you're doing this, when you're watching, listening to these, it's almost like you're having personal relationship or like maybe a voyeur or something that you're listening into this and you're just like, I really got to know
Yeah.
more about this. So what is it that makes this so that you can't tear yourself away? What makes it so engaging?
I think we like to engage as human beings anyway. So it's really neat to have someone talking to you or near you kind of at all times, especially if you're not with someone else, you're just kind of hanging out by yourself. To have the voice in your ear, especially somebody you're comfortable with, it is really comforting. It's like when you're growing up, even it probably comes from the days when you were an infant when you just slept to your mother's voice. I'm sure there's something primal about hearing someone's voice in your ear. And like you said, it's very hypnotizing when you're listening to, I mean, a lot of people say I have a deep voice and they go, wow, every time I hear your voice, I just feel, like you said, mesmerized. I go, wow, that's good because if I have a good message and you're comfortable with my voice, and even if I had a product to sell, it makes you comfortable with my whole brand. It makes you comfortable with my whole everything I'm presenting to you. So it builds a lot of trust and rapport, and you start building a bigger and bigger audience because people like you.
Well, I think that that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Now, one of the things I want to get into, how do you monetize this? You went from having a job and now you're doing this. How do you monetize it?
Yeah, and I went into this with, to be honest, one reason. I wanted to make money doing it. And it was funny because when I started this, I was thinking if I build enough of an audience, then I can just throw commercials on my show and start making money, which is a way to monetize. But when I received my first fan letter, I was like, oh my God, people are actually listening to me, and I'm now responsible. I'm a little bit more responsible for these people. They're actually taking an hour out of their day to listen to me. This isn't about the money anymore. So I've since realized that I can't just pursue the money. However, in order to sustain this model, I have to make money. So I've actually gone through some shifts, like, okay, I'm going to go in for the money. And now I feel like responsible and grateful that people are listening to me. So now I have a big audience. Now, how can I leverage who I have in my audience and my reach in the world in a sense where it's a win-win situation where I can provide a product or a service, or I can bring on a sponsor, which is like a commercial on radio or television, to where it's good for the audience and it's good for the show. One of the ways to make money is to bring on sponsors. For example, if I had, say, 10,000 listeners, a sponsor might pay me between $20 and $50 per thousand. So you can imagine that $100, $500 per episode. If I have, I don't want to get too much into the math, but let's just say that I have a couple sponsors per episode, one that plays for 15 seconds, one that plays for 45 seconds. That could mean a good $500 or $600 on that episode. So if I have an episode a week, that's $500 or $600 a week. If I have an episode every day, multiply that by 7, and you're talking big numbers. So that is one method that a lot of podcasters go for, is to start sponsoring their show. And not just to throw it on there to make a lot of money, but you do have to sustain the model that you're building, because you have bills to pay with that. You have to pay for your hosting, you have to pay for your online services, and especially if you don't work elsewhere and that's your only income, then definitely sponsorship is a way to go. So that's the first one of the first ways. You want me to continue with the second way?
Well, I just have to ask one quick question before we move on. When you're talking about the monthly bills, what are the monthly bills? What are we talking about?
Yep, great question. It's neat with podcasting because you don't have to pay like an FCC license. You don't have to pay these astronomical bills that a radio station would have to pay. It's just times are so different nowadays. When you're online, you basically have a license to broadcast, and you might send when you record a podcast, all you're really doing is recording an audio file, like an MP3, on your computer, and then uploading it to a service. It's basically a computer that's on the internet that you pay the server to hold those files. And I pay like between $15 and $20 a month for them to hold those files. So that's really the only charge for podcasting that I pay. I mean, I had to buy audio equipment, which we can talk about too, but really online, I have to pay for my internet service. And depending on where you are, that's going to be, $20 to $60 or more a month. But a lot of people already have internet, so that's a charge that's already in the budget. On top of that, you might have to pay $10 to $20 for what's called a media host. And they're going to host your MP3 file. They're going to keep it on their computer. So when people download it, it streams from their computer, not yours. So it's not taking up all your bandwidth. $15 to $20 a month there. Once it's on the media host, it sends what's called an RSS feed. And I won't get too technical, but it sends information to iTunes, which distributes your podcast for free. So the only recurring charge, if you wanted a bare bones, I want a podcast online, is for the media host. Pay the media host, and you're in. Now you could add more, like I also want a website, which I do. I pay between $5 and $10 for another host to keep my website on their computer. And as long as I have a presence online, like right now I have the podcast and I also have a website. It's not necessary, but I think it's a good idea to build your presence, build that website online. So that'll cost you another $5 or $10. And there's other solutions for websites, like you can invest in WordPress and other website, what they call, I think they call them frameworks or something. But that's really the only charges involved, having a website and a media host to get your podcast out into the world.
Well, this is fabulous. This information is so important. You know what? The show we're out of time, but I want to ask you, will you come back on? Because I do want to get those other ideas from you. Such an awesome guest. So much great advice. And not only that, just give us very quickly a little tidbit about your show.
Oh, you bet. Thanks for having me on. I'm sorry I probably talked too much.
No, it's awesome.
I'm happy to come back anytime and talk about this. I love podcasting. I host the show, The Overwhelmed Brain. It's a personal growth show. And if you're interested in personal growth, improving yourself, self-development, just type in theoverwhelmedbrain.com, or you can just type it in the search engine, The Overwhelmed Brain. My name is Paul Colaianni, and I'm happy to have you listen to the show and reach out to me and ask me any questions.
Thank you so much. So, what do you think? Isn't that fabulous? I just love podcasting. Paul is a wonderful guest, and he's going to be back on. So thank you so much for tuning in.